the 50,000 watt clear channel voice of news radio.
3, 2.
I'm Deborah Carter, host for Gaining a Voice. Over the course of this television series, we'll be looking at how the news media works, how it influences our daily lives, our thoughts and opinions. But more important, we'll be looking at how you, the viewers, listeners, and readers, can influence the various media. Whether you're a large organization, a community group, an interest group, or an individual, this series can help you gain a voice in the media.
I think the media is essential in getting the message out.
Stand by camera 7, stand by
Stand by
Nancy.
text.
Stand by key.
3, 2, 2. So in other words, what we're getting on television is a reflection of elite opinion.
Cabeça de série número 2, os resultados parciais de 4-6.
But at their core, the media are just big systems of power and tyranny.
From CBC News.
I think we're biased against groups that the middle class of this country are biased against because we don't know anything about them.
Sometimes if there is a crime and they would say, well, the person who did so-and-so was a Muslim. Well, how come you didn't say the person who did another thing was a Christian or a Jew or whatever religion they are from?
Anything at all? Nothing at all.
It's always very, very difficult to get the media out for anything to do with poverty.
Most news is presented in that way, that it's irrelevant to your life and there's nothing you can do about it. Passive.
Thank you. Smoke from a car fire. Police believe it.
My goal as a journalist is to have people discuss issues. It doesn't really matter to me whether someone comes across with a different point of view, because I don't think I'm in a position to say what the right point of view is.
The news media, radio, television, and print may be the greatest single influence on how we see the world and how we see each other. Every day we face a barrage of news coverage. But what exactly is a news story?
You could say that a good story has conflict in it, a good story has human beings, real people in it. A good story actually tells you something that you didn't know before.
Television, I heard it once described as history on the run. That people, for better or for worse, when they sit down in front of their television at 6 o'clock, they expect to see what's happened today. They also expect analysis and background stories and other things. But the one thing they want to see is things that happened today. That's what television is very good at. So it forces us to make a decision in the morning and to act upon it and convince and cajole and discuss with people to get them in front of the camera to tell their story.
Still framing on camera 3 for the first story, please. We have some camera changes in this segment. Robotics. Who's on robotics? Is it you, Brian?
Yes. There are as many definitions of stories as there are people. Everyone has a definition of what constitutes a news story. Natural disasters are stories, you know, flood and earthquake, massive snowstorm. What is also news is how citizens interact with each other, the ebb and flow of a community, that how kids go and play hockey at the local arena and so on. Then what makes stories are sports events are big stories. I mean, whatever human beings do is a story.
It's sort of sometimes hard to define what is news, and it's often surprising for me to say to a group, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know you ran a program like that. I'd love to do a story on it. And they'll say, I didn't think anybody would be interested. I didn't think that that qualified for news. What I would say to people is pay attention to the television show. Watch the news from 6 to 7. Take a look at some of the stories that we do. Take a look at the human interest stories that people share with us. Anything that matters to people, essentially, is news.
I know we've sort of done this story in one form or another in the past, but I was just intrigued by the number of cars that are getting stolen these days.
People will phone a lot and say, why aren't you covering our event or our whatever we're doing? And the first answer is because that's not news. People do that all the time, so we wouldn't normally report it. The classic we'll get is, we're having a big barbecue for community group X. How come you weren't there? And my response usually has to be, well, because everybody has big barbecues or parties for their group, and that's not new to us. That's something that is a norm in the society, so we don't cover what's every day. We cover what is new or what is different.
There was a gas explosion in a suburb of Naples.
This part's good, yeah, with the...
You are funded by the taxpayers of Canada to the tune of over $200,000 this year.
Still to come?
The never-ending task of news gathering. Whether filling columns of print or hours of television, news is often compiled from a variety of sources. But how is all this information sorted and presented in the media? Who decides what will become news and why?
So we have a Portuguese feed that comes in weekly. We have a daily feed from Hong Kong, which we record every morning. It's the evening newscast in Hong Kong, but it arrives here in the morning. We're like a news wholesaler, whereas a newspaper is a product that a consumer can go out and pick up off the street corner. We're a wholesaler that provides information to that newspaper or to a radio or television station as well, and to a whole range of other consumers too, like banks and people like that who want to buy our services and our information.
A University of Quebec professor who did a study on kids who abuse their parents?
No, the harassment has been there. It's been noted all along.
Here in Ottawa, supporters are gathering at LeBreton Flats for a rally to take place in half an hour. Newsday's Danny Gloverman is there now, standing by to tell us more about it. Danny?
Hi, Nancy. People are just starting to arrive now for this rally, which, as you said, starts in about a half an hour. Joining me now is Lynn Atkinson, one of the organizers. Lynn, how did all this get started, this special day?
Well, it's the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And of course, what's happening in our country at the moment and the way we're treating poor people is just absolutely terrible. And so we're taking this opportunity, the International Day named by the UN for the eradication of poverty, to kick off the year 1996.
For example, for tonight, one of the things that I think made us go live, or was influential in our going live from here, was the fact that it was happening during our actual newscast. And because of that, it gave us the opportunity to cover something that had immediacy.
Reading process they're going through that the parents don't realize that they're going through.
Let me ask you this.
Devastated. They need to be in a daycare at that
point. Okay, but let me, is the daycare addressing that? Most papers have a left bias. The Sun chain less so. But the Sun chain, you see, the left and many others sort of snicker at the Sun. You know, any newspaper or any individual who questions some of these dearly held precepts, you know, he's labeled immediately, or she is a redneck or whatever. The great preponderance of the press, television, certainly the print, is from the left perspective.
I think it's safe to say that people who go into journalism tend to have an enthusiasm for social justice. And to the extent that that plays out in the political field, that could be described as left of center, I suppose.
I feel mainstream media has become more and more right-wing. It is more and more controlled by fewer and fewer people and by big business.
What is of interest to me is that when we cover things, that we are fair in our comments and so on. That when we criticize people, we make sure that both sides of a story are heard. That is what people should expect us to do, but not to do propaganda for them. That's not my job. That's not the job of newspapers.
I think one of the great myths of journalism, especially in North America, is the idea of objectivity. I think every person, every thinking person has a filter of life in which and how they characterize what's going on. And certainly, as senior political correspondent, someone that's been covering politics for most of their professional career, cannot help but to have that filter. And I think it's important for all three parties in news gathering to understand that. And the three parties are the newsmakers, they're the media themselves, and it's the audience.
The people who work for the Ottawa Citizen are individuals. Individuals have opinions. They're also professional journalists, so their training is to attempt to separate their own personal opinions from what they do in the paper. most of the times they succeed. Most of the times an individual person's likes or dislikes or beliefs don't get into what appears in the paper as news reporting.
Media now is a big factor in why people hate poor people, because of what they've said and what they've done over the years. They have set up poor people for this. Poor people could not get their point of view across.
The general sense that one gets from watching the media, reading the media, I think it's fair to say that despite a few dissenting voices here and there, the overall sense one gets is fairly clear. Let's say on the deficit issue, it's that, we're in dire straits, and the problem with the deficit is due to social spending.
That sounds like the advisable maneuver, but how do you get around then the Saskatchewan position of the lawyer saying, I was there from day one, and in fact, every provincial health ministry, according to him, had a lawyer there from day one.
Well, being there is different. It has to do with this. It has to do with how you conduct yourself.
Wasn't it a good one today on the...
Yeah. It's a question of access. It's a question of opportunity. It's also a question of presenting views, and views that are minority views, and that cannot be shown or talked about or discussed by anybody else than minorities themselves.
People every day are trying to find the most relevant stories. I think at the end of the day, it is possible that there are, in quotes, blind spots. But that's one of the reasons that we try to put together those of us who have or who have had, as is my case, the responsibility for hiring. You try to basically build a staff in a news organization that reflects as well as possible the country and the people in it.
So we should never have been into any social services. These hotel rooms are already booked. The tour buses, the restaurants, the whole industry is booked for an event.
The community group, or whatever group it is, wants to get its point across. That's why they're there. It's a matter of manipulation. We want the story, so we're going to manipulate the group. The group wants to get its point on the air, so it's going to try and manipulate us. Mutual manipulation, if you will. And everybody knows it, and it's a game. The politicians know it. The press knows it.
We like to approach them and say, just tell the facts. Let the perfectly intelligent readers or perfectly intelligent viewers make their decisions. Do not manipulate. Be straightforward.
Apparently the Health Council will meet this afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock, open meeting, and the expectation from a couple of the people that he talked to is they may announce today their scenarios.
It's the first legitimate opportunity we have to ask.
Yeah.
We're fairly accessible in terms of, our phone number is there, our fax number is there. We try and make people feel that they can contact us with ideas. We're not a daily news program. We're not there to do the events of the day as they occurred. There are 23 other hours a day on Newsworld that do that. And we are an hour that really tries to separate itself out and say, this is a time for reflection.
We're a pretty tough sell for community organizations in general because community organizations, by their very nature, are very local. And we tend to be looking for a broader scope, a wider sweep.
특별한 경쟁이 북한 공관의 이 같은 현성의 3등 소위원의 부인 최 씨는 김일성 대학을 졸업한 여성 엘리트로 북한 권력설 50위 안에 드는
CFMT TV is the only multilingual over-the-air broadcaster in Canada.
4, 3, and run the Cantel. Cards. 1.
And our mandate is to serve the various ethnocultural communities.
9,
8,
7, 6, 5 to pad.
Right now we're broadcasting in 15 languages to 18 cultures. We have 3 nightly newscasts on the air in Italian, Portuguese, and Cantonese.
We sell 30-second spots, we sell 15-second spots, we sell 60-second spots. That's part of it. The other thing we do, though, is we work with advertisers to really design campaigns that are going to get either people into their stores or also sell their products.
750-6254, Blues Traveler on Magic 100.
You're going to see wild strawberries at Barrymore's.
That is a tree
because I have 4 children, and the oldest one is 5, and my husband and I haven't been anywhere in so long.
You guys get out of the house.
You're listening to the 50,000 watts clear channel voice of news radio, WBZ Boston.
Advertising dictates the size of the paper, because most newspapers work on a ratio of X% of news to X% of advertising. So if we have lots of advertising, then we have a big paper and lots of space for news.
You know, believe it or not, there is not a conspiracy up there of the people who own media organizations. They don't have the time, or most importantly, the will, to phone up every program that might appear on their network, or for that matter in their newspaper, and talk to every reporter and say, I don't want you talking to Joe Smith because he represents a point of view that I don't agree with. It just doesn't work that way. It can't possibly work that way.
I'm Sheila Rogers. I'm here for Peter Zosky. I'll see you after the news. I just thought I'd bring him in and keep this country together. He'll make the connection.
It is important for community organizations to have a media profile, because I guess partly because it gives a sense to people out there that there are alternatives. I mean, there tends to be such an avalanche of opinion all pointing in one direction if you listen to the media. Usually it's a different direction than community groups are pointing in. And so I think it's important that those community groups be evident so people see that there are alternatives and there are people out there articulating alternatives.
And I think the media is afraid of change. The owners of the paper, the editors, many of the reporters are of that generation, educated in the 60s and 70s. And the world, they feel they're losing the world they know and feel secure in. And I think that this intimidates them and frightens them.
Having the media, the mainstream media, begin to do stories of individuals within our community and talking about the plight, and the editorials being quite positive in supporting Japanese Canadians, that I think shifted the attention and attitudes within our own community, because as that developed, more people in our community began to support us.
The media lots of times asks the wrong questions around poverty. I had a guy call me up just yesterday, and he was saying, show me some programs that work to get people off poverty. I said, you're asking the wrong question. Even if you had a program that got 100% of the people who took it off of poverty by getting a good job, those people would displace other people who couldn't get that job because we don't have enough jobs for people.
You know, when amongst ourselves as Muslims, when we talk about something being Islamic, it's something to be revered and something to be respected. You'd pick up a paper, any paper, it says Islamic radicals, you know, terrorists, Islamic terrorists, and Islamic fundamentalists is everyday occurrence in the news, in the newspapers. So, we're really confused where that terminology is coming from and why the media, insists on using the word Islamic in conjunction with fundamentalism, terrorism.
So personalize it, tell me your story, give me access. Too many times with local groups, we'll call and they'll say, oh, well, nobody wants to talk on camera, or, oh, I'm sorry, I just can't do that quickly enough. Maybe give me a couple of days.
Whatever's easier.
Yeah, let's do a two-shot.
Two-shot?
Okay.
Okay. Tara, you're staying here with your friend's family, right?
Yeah.
Know that we need to personalize it, know that we need to do it yesterday. In other words, when you get a call from a reporter and you're interested in getting access and gaining access to the medium, what you've got to do is get your act in order and get it in order quickly. We work on tight deadlines, and when we call and we say we can be over in 2 hours, your job, if you want the coverage, is to set it up.
Reporters like nothing more than to get a break on a story. So if you want to ensure not just good coverage, but better coverage, call soon. Call us faster, call us soon, and give us an exclusive. So if you have a report that's coming out on a Wednesday, for example, give the reporter a copy Monday. And they can have it in the paper on Tuesday. And that gives them an edge on the competition, and that means that I'm not one to have the last kick at the can when you release it at a press conference on Wednesday. It may tick off some other reporters, but that's too bad as far as I'm concerned. I'm paid to get the stories first.
There are journalists and editors who will tell you, we can only write this kind of stuff if you're knocking on the door of the office every day and making a fuss. If we don't have any support out there, we can't write it.
Wrap it up, Rob. We're rolling 6. I'm sorry, 5, I had the last word. 4.
So get to know the program, get to know the reporter, get to know whoever you can to be able to decide, okay, that's the place I want to go. So for instance, if you wanted to be able to get your message on Ben Murgy Live, for instance, you'd watch that show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am Raphael Ben Murgy. This is Ben Murgy Live.
Decide what kind of thing that they liked, like what stories does that show actually do, and then try and find out the one person in that program to talk to that has some interest in what you're trying to say.
The worst thing is somebody gets on the phone and they start telling you this, and they say, but then you'd have to call so-and-so because they know more about it. And then you go and talk to your boss and they say, well, why don't you give the guy a call? And you give a call and then there's nobody around, and before you know it, the story is getting to be very, very inconvenient.
We try to get in touch with the mainstream media many times, sending them press releases about the different activities, different events, different workshops, our participation, our contributions to the society, contributions to the city, contributions to many organizations. How many are there that are printed in the mainstream media? Not many.
It's a really conflicted sort of feeling in a sense, because what we do is really about human rights, and we shouldn't have to market ourselves, and we shouldn't have to say, this is why it's so appealing that you have to support us. But unfortunately, that's the climate we're in, so that's what we're going to do.
The biggest mistake is a failure to recognize the pressures that the average reporter or editor or someone like that operates under. And the fact that your story is merely important or even crucial does not mean that it necessarily will get attention from the media. That merely means it's important or crucial.
Think of all the media attention and public attention as a pie. And that's all, that one pie is all the attention that's out there, because there's only so much time on the radio for newscasts and television, and there are so many pages in a newspaper. Your objective should be to get a little bigger piece of that pie.
Okay, doesn't look like we're going to get on today. Yeah, I know, sadly. You raise a good point. It's just we're not getting through many calls, as you can probably tell. Yeah, it's a dense subject.
I mean, sometimes it's worthwhile trying to get an editorial in the New York Times. Other times it's worthwhile trying to reach people in churches. Other times it's worthwhile to have a demonstration, Otherwise, it's worthwhile to set up your own press. I mean, there's no right answer.
In 5, 4, reading commercial, 2, 1. Fade audio video.
The news media is today's town hall meeting. It's where issues are discussed, opinions are shaped, and democracy comes alive. Democracy needs the voice of the people, and in today's world, the more voices that are heard in the news media, the more democratic we are as a society. Gaining a voice will help you participate in the news media. Other programs in this series will show you who to contact and how to get your message across. For Gaining a Voice, I'm Deborah Carter.